You are here for Motivational Interviewing 101. You are at the right place, and we are glad that you are here. We're going to be talking about this great tool today, motivational interviewing, and there is a lot to it. So, we're just going to be doing an introduction today, but we are so thankful for you to be here today and thankful that our guest speaker is going to be facilitating shortly. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Carissa. I am an associate consultant with Solvera. And we have been doing this project in collaboration with CDSS and the Refugee Programs Bureau. Hannah, if you want to go to the next slide. And as I mentioned, I'm Silvera. I have a few of my other teammates here today, and we are a nonprofit consulting group that we are working on just finding ways of better ways of doing good in the community. And so we have been thankful for this partnership with CDSS and RPB and this in order to do this agency learning series where we're gathering feedback from all of you to create content that is relevant, helpful, and requested by people in the field right now across California who are working with refugees and other ORR eligible populations. As I mentioned, next slide, Hannah. This is the California Newcomers Project. We have been doing a couple of different things with this project. Next slide. We have been doing agency interviews. We have been doing this webinar series as well. We have launched a few different helpful tools on supportguide.org, like our provider directory. A few of you probably were in that webinar where we launched our provider directory and taught you how to create a profile on our provider directory and use it to find other providers across the state of California and in your areas. We would love to continue to get topics from you and learn from you all and gather your feedback about what we're able to present to the community. So there are a lot of ways to engage in this California Newcomers Project. Today, you're already doing one of those by attending this webinar series. So thank you for already engaging in this work that we're doing. Next slide. As I mentioned, we took a break in October and November, and we are very glad to be back today with Motivational Interviewing 101. We will be doing a few more learning series in the new year, but I will be sending out information about that. So just want to keep some suspense around there. We'll send you some information about what's coming up soon. Today, Motivational Interviewing 101, we're going to be learning a brief understanding of motivational interviewing, its methods, how to apply them immediately in client interactions. We always want to bring relevant and useful tools that you can implement right away. And we also want to enhance confidence in supporting client autonomy and decision making. So these are things you're going to be able to walk away with from this training today. Next slide. All right. So some just reminders. Everyone is on mute right now. If you do have questions, you can put those in the chat. So you have access to the chat, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar today. Also, I will be doing a Zoom poll in just a moment. It is anonymous, so just know that you can access that. And when you participate in that, it is anonymous. But I'm just gathering information about who's in the room with us today, from what counties are you representing, all that good information. At the end of the webinar, you'll have a link to a survey where you can provide feedback to us about this webinar series and just provide information about maybe what you want to learn about next. We are recording this webinar as well, and I will be posting it on Support Guide shortly after this webinar, so you'll have access to it. You can use it in future train if you want to watch it again, or if you know people weren't able to join us today and you want them to be able to watch this content, it'll be on our website as well. And just a quick reminder, if you are news or media, kindly go ahead and exit this call. This is a webinar for people who are directly engaging in the work with refugees and other ORR eligible populations across California. We are having, okay, sorry about that. It looks like we're having a lot of people still join, so very thankful for that. I am going to launch a poll right now. I'll give you about 60 seconds to put in your answers. It's just about seeing who's in the room with us today. It helps us know who's engaging across the state. So I'm going to launch it and it'll come up on your screen shortly. Okay, seeing some people put in their answers. Thank you so much. There's just two questions on there. Okay, about 20 more seconds. Thank you for participating in this quick poll. Okay, about 5 more seconds. Would love to get as much participation in this as possible. Thank you for providing this information to us. All right. Okay. Well, we're about to get started. So, Hannah, I would love for you to go to the next slide so I can introduce our facilitator today. A lot of you may have are already familiar with her as she facilitated a webinar for us earlier this year on psychological first aid. And so we're glad to have her back. Megan is a doctoral candidate at the University at Buffalo School of Social Work. Her research that she's doing currently is focusing on the well-being of refugee and immigrant communities, in particular focusing on youth. She is focused on trauma-informed practices in institutions and organizations that serve newcomer communities and in understanding the role of psychosocial supports in supporting well-being. So we are very glad to have her today to provide information on Motivational Interviewing 101, and I will go ahead and hand it over to her now. Thanks, Megan. All righty. Let's see if we got, oh, there we go, Megan. I think you're now able to come off camera and off mute. Okay, great. So this Megan is really actually here, everyone. So glad that she's here. Megan, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much, Carissa. So today we'll be covering motivational interviewing. If you want to go to the next slide, Hannah. We'll be talking about the core skills, change talk, and some examples to help us think through motivational interviewing in the newcomer space. We won't be covering all of the stages of change or issues related to client accountability after they've made a decision, or decision making during crisis situations. As Carissa mentioned, we're kind of giving the basics today, right? Just an intro. So during our time, we want to embrace curiosity, offer mutual respect, share feedback, and reflect on our why. Next. So here's an overview of our time together. So first we'll talk about motivational interviewing basics and how it's different than a telling approach. Then we'll talk about the core skills connected to motivational interviewing, language you can listen for in a conversation, and some examples. And then finally, we'll talk a bit more about motivational interviewing in the context of newcomer serving agencies and explore some more examples. Next. So let's dive in. You can move on to the next slide. So I want to start with a definition of motivational interviewing that will help set the foundation for our conversation today. So Cormier and co-authors describe motivational interviewing as a style of helping and a method of communication. It's a set of assumptions about human nature and the process of human change. So these brief descriptions highlight how motivational interviewing is more than a technique. It's a mindset and a way of being. So it's a framework or perspective that shapes how we enter conversations. Next. As I mentioned, we don't have time today to cover all the stages of change, but it is helpful to know which stages motivational interviewing can help address. So motivational interviewing is a technique used in working primarily with clients who are in the pre-contemplation and contemplation stages of change. And so pre-contemplation is the stage where they're not even ready to acknowledge there is a problem. So you may or may not have seen a video where two individuals are chatting and you don't at first see their faces, but one is talking about all the pain they're experiencing, all these headaches, and the other person is just looking and nodding, and you kind of get, as you start to see the front of their faces, the idea that something might be not quite right with the individual they're looking at, and you see the person talking about the pain they're experiencing in their head and these headaches, and there's a nail in their head. But when the individual tries to suggest that they maybe do something about the nail, they get very defensive, right? And they don't want to be fixed, or they don't want to talk about the nail. They want to think about other things, right? Or talk about other things. And so that's kind of that stage, right? It's a protective state. It could be complaining or blaming or defensive, but it's not naming the problem. And then we have contemplation, right? So this is a stage where they're ready to acknowledge that there's an issue, but maybe in a state of ambivalence. So to do this or to do that, to manage my diabetes or to eat what I want, right? So that space where they're feeling tension about the decision they want to make or maybe want to make, but weighing what it might mean in other spaces. Next. So the spirit of motivational interviewing, right? If we think of motivational interviewing as a mindset, then we want to talk about what should shape that or inform how we're approaching conversations. So you'll see these named differently by different sources, but for our conversation today, we're going to use these terms, right? So client-centered, collaborative, evokes intrinsic motivation, and explores ambivalence. So first, client-centered. Motivational interviewing emphasizes meeting clients where they are, believing in their inherent worth, and recognizing their autonomy. Collaborative, right? This is a partnership where clients are the experts in what they want and how they want to get there. Right? Our role is to help empower clients to get where they want to go. And then evokes intrinsic motivation. Right, so motivational interviewing is focused on supporting clients as they uncover their motivation for change, not trying to get them to do what we want them to do or what anyone else wants them to do. And then explores ambivalence. So motivational interviewing acknowledges and normalizes the internal tug of war that clients may be feeling related to potential areas of change. So you've likely experienced some internal tug of war yourself. For example, if you've ever wanted to start waking up earlier in the morning, but then you keep staying up so late at night that you're not able to wake up early, the tension between the things that we want to do, right? This would be good for me, but I also want to do this thing that gets in the way of doing that other good thing. Next. So the spirit of motivational interviewing helps inform how we communicate. So let's look at the differences between a telling approach versus a motivational interviewing informed asking approach. So examples of telling might include giving advice or a directive on what the next step should be. This approach centers our perspective rather than the client's. Asking, on the other hand, includes exploring meaning, engaging collaboratively, evoking their own motivation, and helping support their autonomy. So let's take a look at an example within a newcomer employment program. Next slide. Yeah. So imagine a conversation with a client that starts like this. The manager at your work reached out to tell me that you could move up to the next position and be a line manager if you just take the test. And we're going to walk through kind of what potential next pieces of this conversation are, if you want to move to the next slide. So a directive way to finish that thought would be, you should take the test as soon as possible. in the chat, add your thoughts on how that might land for a client. How would you respond to that if you were on the receiving end? Feel free to just add in how that might make you feel, or what your thoughts might be if you were having a conversation with a client. And yeah, do I want to be a line manager? It would make me feel anxious, pressured. How much is it? Yeah, yeah, feeling pressured, pressure to hurry and take the test. Yeah, stress, worried about if it works in the schedule. Questions, am I ready? Yeah, question of confidence, lack of choice, stressful, money. Why? Yeah, what new responsibilities does it mean? Yeah, these are great responses. Yep. Yeah. How will that affect childcare? Yes. Yeah, you all are naming like really important questions, right? And ways that someone might process that. We'll keep moving on. Yeah, culture shock. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so as you all are mentioning, right, communicating in this way assumes that we know what the client wants and what's best. Like you all said, it might make the client feel pressured to comply with what we want, um, or they might feel judged if their thoughts don't align with our words, which might lead them to shut down, or internalize the idea that their goals don't matter. Um, Next slide. Yeah. But what if we shifted from telling, you should take the test as soon as possible, to asking, how important is moving up to the next position to you? This helps us explore meeting with the client rather than assuming importance. If you want to go to the next slide. So take another minute to add in the chat how this shift in communication might land instead. Right? What might it communicate to a client? Yeah, my thoughts and wants matter. Yeah, opportunity to share more context, bigger picture. I get to have a choice. Yeah, yeah, right. It communicates in a different way, right? Or lands for folks in a different way. Understanding and empathy, support. Yeah, builds rapport, absolutely. Prompts thinking about the future. Yeah, what do I think is important to me? Yeah. Yes. Responsible, building a vision. Yeah, exactly. Yes, opportunity. Good. Yeah, let's move on to the next slide. Yeah. As you all mentioned, again, right, communicating in this way can help express that the client has autonomy, that they have the power to set the direction of their decisions and goals, and that you, as the case manager, or in whatever your provider role is, right, that you're there to support and collaborate. Um, right, so in the way that telling or directing um, expresses that maybe we know what's best, right? It's inconsistent with motivational interviewing, inconsistent with the ways we want to communicate autonomy and support and empowerment, right? So telling or directing is one behavior that's inconsistent with motivational interviewing. Other inconsistent behaviors include confronting or warning, advising without permission, and raising concern without permission, right? Anytime we're entering into a space or providing information without first consulting the client or asking them if we have permission to express those things. Yeah, thank you all for your thoughts in these. Um, We'll keep moving forward. Yeah, thanks. So to summarize, right, motivational interviewing is a way of thinking and communicating. It's client-centered and collaborative, and it centers intrinsic motivation and explores ambivalence, is supportive of clients across those stages of change, and involves meeting clients where they are, right? If they're not ready to address the nail, then how can we meet them in a place where they are and then walk with them when they're ready? And acknowledges clients' inherent worth and autonomy, right? It's in the way that we ask questions or follow up in the conversation in ways that are supporting and expressing our belief in their worth and autonomy, that they have the power to make choices, and recognizes our role is to help empower clients to get where they want to go, not to fix or direct them towards specific goals that we think would be a good fit. Next. So now we'll build on the spirit of motivational interviewing by talking through some specific skills and cues to listen for. Next. So you can also go to the next one, yep. So OARS, OARS, is an acronym for 4 skills that motivational interviewing utilizes to support this spirit of motivational interviewing that we talked about. So O is those open-ended questions. So asking questions that evoke thoughts about change rather than impose thoughts about change. So asking, what thoughts do you have about learning English instead of, do you want to learn English? Inviting the client's opinion, not interrogating. What helped you make that decision instead of, why did you choose that? Another example might be, what is most important to you right now as you navigate your new community, right? Asking those questions in ways that allow for thought and for them to explore what is important to them and where they might want to change or make decisions. Then we have A, affirmations. So this is affirming the client's efforts toward positive change. So where we see that happening, we're appreciating and reinforcing those positive efforts. This helps cultivate confidence and self-efficacy. And we can do this in ways that are culturally sensitive and recognize resilience and effort. So as we're affirming, right, we're directing a client's attention to the assets, resources, and values they already possess or have access to. For example, right, saying something like, you've persevered through some very challenging circumstances, right? So acknowledging the ways that they have already made progress, right, or the strengths that they've exhibited. Then we have R, right? So these are our reflections. This involves making a statement that captures what the client is saying. So it's different than asking a question, right? Is this what I hear? Right, which is another tool that we often use. But in this way, we're making a statement and providing space for the client to agree or disagree with what we think we heard them say, and potentially elaborate, right? To be able to say, yes, that is what I'm thinking or feeling, or no, I am actually thinking this, or this is what I'm feeling. It can be simple, like mirroring what you're hearing the client say back to them, but it can also involve adding meaning or emphasis that you're picking up on. Additionally, it can include adding a naming ambivalence. So I'm hearing this, and you're also thinking that, right? Or you want this, but you're not sure about that. So maybe a more clear example, right? So you want to learn English, but you also feel pressure to work the maximum number of hours, and that makes it hard to go to class. Right, so being able to offer reflections requires that we listen deeply, right? That we're engaged in active listening in those conversations. And then summaries, right, our S. And so summaries are just a collection of reflections. So as we've listened to a client in a conversation and we've made reflections along the way, right, then we get to maybe what feels like we're coming to the end of the conversation. So how do we summarize? How do we help consolidate and link words that we've heard clients say toward actionable goals, and kind of guide conversations toward areas of change by asking, by stating the things that we have heard, right, and bringing them kind of into a summarized bubble, right? Like this is what I hear. This is the ambivalence. This is what I think you're saying, and bringing it all together, right? So that there's again that space for them to reflect on and engage in what their own motivation is and how to move forward. Next. So now we want to have a chance just to practice open-ended questions together, right? So this is the first of our ORs, the O. So in the chat, rewrite a common closed-ended intake question, or a question that you regularly use in your service provision, into an open-ended question that provides space for clients to express their goals, hopes, and challenges without being limited to a yes or no answer. There are some potential questions on the slide if that helps you. What is your housing situation? Yeah, where are you currently staying, and are you happy in that place? Yeah. Are you currently employed? Okay. Yeah, I wonder if are you currently employed could shift into how are you feeling about your current work situation, right? So taking that and moving it from a yes, no to provide space. What are your plans? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? Yeah. How would you find your way there? Yeah. How do you get to work? Doctor's appointments. Yeah. Let's discuss your short and long-term career goals. Yeah. How do you manage to get back and forth? Yeah. So asking those questions that provide space, right, for more than just yes, no, but give them the opportunity to expand, to share specific goals. Do you have friends or support system? Right? Yeah, that's a great way to ask and to help them think about what supports they have. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Or how are you feeling um, about learning English? Right? Where do they feel when they're thinking about those things? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. What are your goals with learning English? Great. Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. We'll keep moving. If you want to move us to the next slide. Yeah. So we made it a couple of clicks. I think you can bring in all of the content for this. Perfect. So you might be wondering, right, why motivational interviewing matters for work in the resettlement context. So motivational interviewing, right, can be particularly important for this context because it supports self-determination even amid systemic challenges, right? It can help reduce resistance and foster trust in cross-cultural context. Right, so the spirit of motivational interviewing, those 4 areas we discussed earlier, client-centered, collaborative, evokes intrinsic motivation, and explores ambivalence, these support and align with the ideas that help foster cultural humility as we're engaging with clients. So we're approaching clients with compassion and a posture of humility. Recognizing their expertise and autonomy and empowering them to get where they want to go. So, right, again, recognizing clients as the expert, meeting them where they are, including a cross-cultural difference. And we're not expecting them to be in the same place that we are, or even to be ready to change something that we see as problematic. So motivational interviewing, right, also helps us empower clients to identify and act on their own goals, right, through these open-ended questions, through reflections. So again, we're supporting clients as they assess how important something is to them, and how confident they are in addressing it and how they want to get there. Next. So because of this posture, right, the ability to adapt and be flexible, and the posture of humility as we're entering into conversations, right? Motivational interviewing offers that flexibility and adaptability to be used across cultures, right? So motivational interviewing was created in the 1980s. There are trainers from over 45 different countries. It's been adapted, studied, and tested internationally for more than 30 years. And it's been well established as a best practice across cultures, and has even been translated into over 75 languages, right? So these kind of tidbits just help reinforce and help encourage us in that it's effective in its use across cultures, and can help us better understand just how adaptable and useful motivational interviewing can be in the contexts in which we work, right? Even as we bump into challenges discussing change. So if you want to move to the next slide. So we have another interactive opportunity, right? So speaking of bumping into challenges, right, as we're discussing change. So in the chat, we'd love for you to share what are some of the most common challenges you face when discussing change with clients? Letting them know the program has ended. Yeah. Demanding immediate employment. Yeah. Okay, limiting beliefs that they have about themselves. I'm too old to learn English. Eligibility for a program. Yeah, advising a client that they're not eligible. Adjusting to financial stress. Yeah. Hard to see past immediate survival needs. Yeah, fear for change. Doubts. Yeah, managing expectations, rushing the process. Not wanting to participate. Yeah, having to hit program numbers, ensure grants. Yep. Language barriers. Yeah, discussing a living situation. Yep. Okay, yeah, that's difficult. Yeah, fear in the community, work permits. Yeah, fear for even leaving their homes or homelessness. Yeah. Yeah, ICE. Yeah, it's important to recognize those structural systemic things. Clients' expectations. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not trusting the system, fear and uncertainty. Yeah, right. So we recognize there are um, many challenges that we may run into when we're engaging in conversations about change, even stigma within their own community. Yeah, yeah. Let's keep moving. Next slide. So, right, and as we're thinking about all these difficulties and the challenges we may run into, um, it's in it may be helpful to be aware of signals or cues that highlight when a client is thinking about change, right? So what are the things that might help us to know when a client is ready to move forward in conversations about change, or is thinking about change and identifying space for that? So there are 5 different types of change talk. So as you practice motivational interviewing with clients, you want to listen for these types of change talk and encourage clients in their motivations and reasons for change, right? So desire, ability, reasons, need, and commitment. So desire is those statements about wanting to change, right? So voicing something that signifies they have a desire or a want to change. Ability is those statements about their capacity or confidence to change, right? You all mentioned an uncertainty or not believing in themselves, or I'm too old, right? So those statements of about capacity or confidence identify and kind of cue us into ability, right? How are they feeling about their ability to make this change? And then reasons for change, right? Specific arguments for why change would be good. Those things of, there's kind of like, this would be helpful if, right? Or this might do this thing. Or statements of need, right? Statements about the necessity of change, why this change actually is is not just something that would be good, but is a necessity, something that we need to happen. And so this could be tied to values or consequences, right? If there's a negative consequence connected to not moving forward with that change, right? That may be something that comes up. You also have commitment statements, right? So these are statements that indicate a firm intention or plan to take action, right? Something that cues us into knowing that the client is not only aware and has a desire to change and recognizes like need for that, but they're ready to move forward, right? They're ready to have a plan and to talk about that. So why might it be important to listen for these cues and encourage clients? If you want to go to the next slide. So limited choice during displacement and resettlement, right, can lead to hesitancy or uncertainty. So by listening for these change talk cues, we can support clients in their efforts to think about change and move toward making a decision that aligns with what they want. Sometimes it might be helpful to have an additional tool in your pocket to assess motivation for change. And so I'm going to share a little bit about one specific tool. Right? So if you want to go to the next slide. So the MI Center for Change suggests that a simple rating scale used in conjunction with those open-ended questions can help clients articulate what is important to them and how confident they feel making that change. So the scale serves as a way to facilitate conversation, not as something to be used in isolation, right? It includes asking a client to respond to two scales, right? One on importance and one on confidence, and then asking open-ended follow-up questions that support client autonomy, motivation, and confidence. So next. So let's revisit the earlier employment program example and walk through the use of the scale and open-ended questions. After I've shared what I've heard from their employer, right? Just echoing again, right? The manager at your work reached out to tell me that you could move up to the next position and be a line manager if you just take the test, right? So I might move from that into a scaled question. And we'll go through slide by slide and kind of parse out, right, what that looks like. So if you want to move to the next slide. So using the scaled questions, right, would be saying on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being not at all and 10 being the most important, how important is moving up to the next position to you? And so the client might respond, I think I'm a 5 because I know the position does pay more and that it would be good for my family, right? So next. So the next steps include asking why the client chose this number and not a lower number, which may seem a bit backwards, right? Often we are asked or want to ask, why didn't you choose something higher, right? But asking this way instead of in comparison to a higher number, like why are you at a 5 instead of a 10, will lead a client to tell us why it is important instead of why it isn't as important. Right? So then we can ask what would help move that client up to a higher number. And this provides an opportunity for them to assess and potentially plan for change, right? So in this example, my next ask might be, why are you at a 5 instead of a 2? And the client might respond, I think I'm at a 5 because I know the next position makes more money, and then we could get the car that we need, right? And then my response, right, might be, what would help move that number from a 5 to something a little higher? And their response, right, that gives them space to think, oh, what would move me up? What would make this more important to me, right? They might respond, I would need to figure out childcare because the hours for that position are different, right? And then that mention of childcare could be an opportunity to explore the client's thoughts on childcare, what resources they have, and or what they need to address that issue, right? So using the scales with the open-ended questions provides just space for them to keep thinking, right? To explore why it's important to them. Um, then you might shift to asking a scaled question that explores their level of confidence related to making that potential change. So how confident are you in your ability to make a change, to move up to the next position on a scale of 1 to 10, right? And so then the client might say, I think I'm a 4. If you want to move to the next slide. So then my follow-up questions would follow the same pattern as before. So asking, why are you at a 4 and not at a 2? Right? And again, asking this way provides an opportunity for them to explore what makes them confident, to talk about past successes. It helps cultivate confidence. In this example response, right, the client replies, because I started not knowing anything about my current job, but now I know what to do and I'm strong, right? So then I might ask, what might it take for you to move up a couple of notches, right, to feel more confident? And this is an opportunity for them to name additional resources, right, support they might need, including ways that we can support and partner with them. The client might respond, I think I would need to learn what all that is required for that position and what is on the test, right? Which could lead into a conversation about where they might be able to find the information and next steps he could take if that is a change that they want to make, right? So in this sample conversation, you may have picked up on change talk cues. Let's see. And so, right, a desire for change. I know the next position does pay more, and that would be good for my family, right? Indicating desire for that, right? Knows that it pays more. The ability to change, I know what to do now, right? They've had that experience in the past and have been able to know what to do, have been able to grow in that position. And then what would the need for change, right? We could get the car that we need, right? That's would be a consequence, a positive consequence, right, for taking that new position. And then a commitment to change would be just the openness to explore next steps, right? So while we may not hear this much change talk truncated into such a brief discussion, the example hopefully helps us to better understand how using motivational interviewing can work and what we can be listening for as we talk with clients and help them move toward their goals. I noticed a
Megan,
question.
quick question that we got in the chat.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just thought it would be, we're going to hopefully have time at the end of this to have a little bit more discussion or questions asked, but I thought this would be a good time to go ahead and ask this one. So, in this discussion where we're asking these scaling questions, like what makes you a 5 instead of a 2, or what would make you go from a 5 to a little bit higher? How How is that, like, how do you approach that where it doesn't sound like you're telling them that they need to go to a higher number? So we had someone in the chat say, isn't that telling when we're asked suggesting that they should move higher? So how do you talk about that where it's not a telling situation, but instead um, aligns with what we're doing in motivational interviewing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it really is about one, remembering that our role, right, we're not trying to get them to a place. Like if it's not important to them, it's not important to them. But we're providing space for them to assess, is there something that would make this more important to me? Or is there something that would increase my confidence, right? So we're not asking, we don't want to ask in a way that communicates you need to be more confident in this, right? Or this should be more important to you, right? But it's just, is there something that would cause this number to move up for you, right? Is there something about this that if this changed or if this was different, then this role would be more important to you, or if this other issue was solved, right, this would be more important to you, right? So it's really about providing the opportunity for them to explore that and to think through, oh, is there a scenario in which this would be important to me? Or is there a scenario in which, or certain resources, right, that if I had them, then I would feel more confident, right? Or if I had this information, right, then I would feel more confident. So again, just keep reminding ourselves, right? We're not trying to move them specifically to a certain spot, but we're providing space that if they want to move toward change, right? If that's something that is important to them and that they decide it is, right? We're giving them the space to explore that. Does that help answer the question?
We got a couple thumbs up
Yeah.
as you were going from the person who asked, so I think so.
Okay, great. Yeah, excellent question. Yeah, so we'll keep going, and hopefully we'll also have maybe some time at the end for questions as well if other things come up. Um, so again, another opportunity for engagement, right? In the chat, we would be grateful to hear your thoughts on these two questions, right? Where have you noticed clients feeling stuck in their resettlement goals? And how might a scaling question be helpful in those situations? So it may be that some of these things overlap with the challenges that you bump into as you're having conversations about change, right? They may be very similar or a lot of the same things. Children, yeah. So the impact of raising kiddos while they're trying to do life things. Getting their first jobs, yeah. Entry and no English, but with learning English while having other responsibilities, yeah. Not sure about their status in the future. Yeah. One family, yeah, the car, transportation. Yeah. Women navigating that role of wanting to be out in the work world or education, but feeling responsible because of cultural expectations. Yeah, technology. Yeah, another mention of those cultural gender roles. Confusion about how to apply for things, healthcare, education, social services. Right. Yeah, yeah. Lack of certification or not having what they need. Government support. Yeah. I'm gonna keep moving us forward. I know we're getting close to time. So, um, right, as we can continue sharing and adding thoughts in the chat, right, about how you might respond using those open-ended questions, affirmation, reflections, right, and maybe some scaling. Um, you can continue to add those, and maybe we'll have time, right, to explore those some more. But right, just remembering that motivational interviewing helps us practice active, reflective listening as we help clients towards change, right? So we want to ask those open-ended questions to elicit clients' thoughts. We want to affirm the efforts clients are making toward positive change. Offer reflective statements and that capture what we're hearing clients say about their thoughts, feelings, and ambivalence, and then summarizing all that we're hearing as a way to link and guide conversations. And we want to listen for those change talk cues, right? So that we can support self-determination and help reduce resistance. So next, right, we're moving into the final portion of our time together. And so we may move a little bit more quickly just so we can get through it. But if you want to go to the next slide, right, just putting everything in context, right? So it's important to acknowledge some potential challenges related to using motivational interviewing in newcomer contexts, right? As well as strategies that might help address those. And so many of these you all mentioned, right? Their engagement with systems and those cultural issues and differences, right, that might emerge as challenges. And so those common barriers, right, communication difficulties, cultural norms, system fatigue, right? So language and interpretation challenges are always a consideration when we're working across linguistic lines, right? So because motivational interviewing is based largely on a mindset and not on a specific language or terms that need to be used in our conversations, right? That can help increase accessibility, right? So we can use words that are easy to understand while still employing the mindset and skills of motivational interviewing. And this is helpful for interpreters and clients who speak English, but for whom it's their second, third, fourth, or fifth language, right? So additionally, like the strategies needed for motivational interviewing can help address potential barriers, right? So both active listening and utilizing reflective statements can help us be mindful of where there might be potential interpretation misalignment. The reflective statements in particular allow space for the client to correct us if what we've heard or what's been interpreted didn't quite get it right, right? And we also want to be mindful of cultural norms, specifically cultural views on authority or help seeking. So in conversations about change, a client might respond in ways that they think we want to hear or in automatic compliance, right, rather than out of their own wants and motivations. So this could be a cultural response, or it could be a normal trauma response. So fawning, right? Just deferring to the person that you're having a conversation with, so as to not have to engage in that. So we can help address this by paying careful attention and recognizing when a client is being compliant or withdrawing. Right? If this is something we notice, we can be even more intentional about emphasizing and encouraging clients in their autonomy, reminding them throughout the conversation that it's their choice, that they get to decide what's important and how to get there. Right? We can also address differences in cultural norms by approaching client resistance in ways that respect those norms. So including a more collective approach to questions rather than asking questions that focus solely on the individual's perspective. Right. So a third potential barrier is the fatigue that a client might be experiencing from navigating multiple unavoidable systems, right, which is something that several of you mentioned, right? So clients may be so overwhelmed and exhausted by the number of systems and processes that they have to engage with that they may feel too tired to engage in conversations about change, or maybe feel like it's not possible to change based on the limitations the systems have imposed on them. So strategies to address this include an awareness of the differences between agreement and accommodation. Do they actually agree with what they're saying, with what we're saying, or what we've reflected back to them? Or are they just tired and not able to engage, so they're accommodating us, right? We can also be honest in our conversations with clients and emphasize their autonomy while also acknowledging systems and program constraints. Right? Those two don't have to be mutually exclusive. It may also be helpful once a client has identified a change to help them strategize about how to achieve their plan through small steps rather than bigger steps that may feel daunting or unachievable. So next, I think because of time, we may skip the practice and application, but maybe that's something we could either come back to at a later time or revisit in the follow-up email. So, right, just a quick recap. Motivational interviewing is a mindset rooted in partnership, right? Deep listening and supporting clients in finding their own motivation for change. Motivational interviewing is a way of thinking and communicating, right? Clients are autonomous and have inherent worth, so that shapes how we enter into conversations. We're collaborators and supporters, not drivers of change, right? We are not in the driver's seat. And we're working to support clients in finding their own motivation for change. We should listen more than we speak, offer deep reflections, and cultivate confidence through affirmations. So next, as you leave this space, we'll just encourage you to think about how you might implement motivational interviewing, and if there are phrases or skills that you want to try implementing with a client in a conversation this week. So feel free to add those to the chat. I will hand off the baton. I know we're close to time. I don't know what we have left for questions, but we'll pass that back to Carissa.
All right. Thank you, Megan. We had great interaction in our chat today, so I really do appreciate everyone participating in that. We had some additionally great questions submitted ahead of the webinar and some questions that we didn't quite get to during this training. So we will make sure to include resources and responses to those questions from Megan in the follow-up email as well. I think a lot of the questions would be beneficial for everyone. We had questions about using motivational interviewing and community outreach, what strategies we can use in this current environment with the policies that are changing every day and are one of the biggest concerns of clients. So we will be following up with additional resources and hopefully some responses to some of these questions we didn't get to yet in this training. So thank you for engaging so much and all of the responses that you did give. We have some resources on the screen. We will be providing these slides and recording on support guide as well. So you'll be able to click these links and access additional support from this webinar. Also, we are going to soon be releasing what we call micro lessons. Micro lessons are 5 to 15 minutes long of just asynchronous learning that you can watch whenever you want to. And we'll be having one that's motivational interviewing tips as well. So it'll be things that you learned from this training in a smaller portion that you can access at any time as well. So we will be following up on this with that information. And we are excited that you were here today. So thank you for participating. We will have ways to engage in 2026. So I'll be following up with that information as well. We have our feedback survey on the screen. It's really helpful for us when you provide feedback on the training, for our facilitator, and just information about what you might want to learn next. So again, would love for your feedback. Just go ahead and scan the code on the screen, and I will also follow up with a link in that follow-up email. So you'll have lots of additional resources, responses to questions, links to the survey, all sent to you after this webinar. So thank you again for joining us today. Thank you, Megan, for walking us through Motivational Interviewing 101. It's something that I love to use just in life in general with my friends, family, coworkers, but it's especially useful when we're working with clients who are navigating lots of change all of a sudden in so many different circumstances. So thank you for attending. Thank you, Megan, and I'll be following up shortly with more information. Have a great rest of your day.